This is a really great episode to demonstrate why we have this podcast, which is talking about how do we make these decisions, protecting creativity.
You're listening to the Pro Status Podcast.
And welcome back to another episode of Pro Status. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Drake.
And today we have what?
Episode 2.
Oh, episode 2
for 2021.
Yeah.
So today we kind of want to talk a little bit more about equipment and specifically longevity of equipment, when you should replace it. Technology is advancing really fast, and so we thought we'd kind of dive into talking about gear, specifically how long your gear should last, when you should replace it, and if you should even replace it at all. Yeah, we just kind of wanted to chat about that. I had a thought the other day, which sparked this episode, of most gear for productions. We're talking about like live productions or, you know, what we do for a living. You have your audio equipment, you have your video equipment, and you have your lighting equipment. And things like LED walls are kind of mixed between the lighting and the video world. It's kind of interesting.
I know. There's a bit of overlap.
Yeah. That could be in your props world.
Actually, you know what? I stopped saying video and I try to say broadcast.
I know, but the term AVL, it's kind of hard to get away from. But anyways, I noticed that the gear lifespan is different in all three categories, and we kind of wanted to talk about why that is. And obviously price has a little bit to do with how long your gear lasts. If you buy, you know, an X32, for example, it's not going to last as long as your digital console, and that's just purely based on the X32 is cheap.
Yeah, there's build quality, and then there's also there's technology, and then there's build quality.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
Exactly.
It's pretty much the same with all things.
So I guess let's just kind of dive in. Should we start in the audio world, or?
I mean, I think we should approach it like you would any production, which is, you know, you can't have a video without audio. So let's start with audio.
Okay. So audio, I feel like, audio equipment has the longest lifespan in general. And for example, my number one example was like Meyer Sound. They make line arrays and speakers and things like that. There's lots of venues still using the older generation of Meyer Sound, including Bethel Church still uses the Meyer Mina line array, spelled with an M. And that was almost a 10-year-old technology when it was installed, but they didn't have the new box, which is the Lena, out when Bethel was buying their line array. And I'm just using Bethel as an example. But lots of venues still use UPJs, UP1As.
Yep.
Those are all older generation point source boxes. But and then some places still use Meyer Melodies, Micas.
Oh, yeah.
You know, all those. And it's still a good PA. I wouldn't say it's the best PA, but it's still a good
There's still venues out there using original like JBL line arrays.
Yeah.
Which always makes you laugh.
I know.
They're terrible. And
Yep.
I know that might offend some people.
But I mean,
I'm just a video guy.
Let's look at like the lower end, like RCF. RCF is still around, but they've made speakers that have lasted a long time, and they might not sound nearly as good as other brands. But the longevity, like the amount of time that you can use them, is a long time.
Well, I think in audio, like just, you know, audio overall isn't like the sexiest of things because, you know, it's not visual. But where audio gets underrated is the fact that it isn't visual, but you know when there's good audio and when there isn't.
Absolutely.
Your tolerance might be high, but man, it makes a difference when you have good audio.
Yeah, when it sounds bad, it just sounds bad.
It's like, because you can have bad video and you can be like, this is terrible, I can't watch it. But you can just close your eyes and just listen to it if you want it. Like, you have that option, you know?
But if it sounds bad,
yeah,
you're kind of screwed.
So I think obviously, you know, quality grows with the production needs or the demand, you know, and the audience. But it is definitely the quickest thing that people go, oh, I can skim from there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, it's like it probably takes longer to develop things like speakers because there's so much R&D that goes into developing it for how it sounds, how it rigs, how it responds in different rooms. There's so much that goes into it.
Oh man, acoustical engineering, like designing sound and manipulating it for spaces and applications. I mean, gosh, that's impressive.
And kind of an approach that Meyer has done, which is actually really cool, is like they've had the Lion arrays for quite a while now, but they updated the driver card. So, and now the Lion is a linear box with the new card. But if you already have the Lion, you can buy the card and put it in.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
I think they do some sort of like swap. Like it's not free, but it's not full, an outright cost or whatever. Like you send the old card back kind of thing. So you actually basically got a brand new line array by just replacing the card. So now your PA is linear. So things like that, it's technology, but you're not having to spend, almost $20,000 for a box. You're spending $1,000 or something around there for a card that goes in, and now you have a brand new line array. Yeah. So I feel like
so
things like that.
That's amazing. But you're sorry, complete your thought.
Well, I'm just saying like things like that make, I think, the audio, like, we're specifically talking about PAs right now, but it makes it last longer with the ability to do that kind of thing.
I would agree. I think the exception is, let's just talk about build quality. We went straight to the premium.
Right.
I mean, if you're buying like a cheap Behringer speaker box that's, got a 15-inch
woofer.
Yeah.
Driver.
Woofer. Yeah, driver. I was going to say driver, but, and maybe an underpowered a horn,
Yeah.
Like those suckers will blow. Like they're not going to.
Right. Yes, especially if you drive them hard. Like speakers like that aren't meant to be driven very hard and for very long. And again, it's going to our, that's our cheap end of the spectrum. I would say, you go from Behringer, you got like QSC and then like some JBL, and then it can kind of trickle up from there. QSC is going to last longer than Behringer is, and that's just the nature of the product and what you're buying.
Yeah, so there's probably a threshold for sure. I would say a middle grade, like QSC is probably our lowest quality product, wouldn't you say?
That I would ever recommend, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They do they have a good balance of quality and sound quality and build quality. That they're a good value.
It's a good value product for sure, yeah. And they do last a long time. I mean, we have some K10s and K12s that we've had for a very long time as well. And again, just the build quality of them is a little bit better than some like the Behringer stuff would be. You get the KW line, so they're wood, not plastic. They last longer. Things like that. It's like spend a little bit more, get a little bit nicer product. It's going to sound better. It's going to last longer.
I think the last time I haven't looked in a while, but last time I looked specifically with QSC, the technology was different for the plastic boxes versus the wood ones. So
it is, and they have the .2 or like the .2 line, so the second gen line. But again, let's just take that as an example. That second gen model of the same speaker, the K12, K10, K8, came out a year ago, 2 years ago at this point, but it had been around for like 10 years.
So do you buy technology or do you buy build quality in that scenario? Because that's what it comes down to.
Right.
One version has newer technology, but doesn't mean it's better.
And I think all that they did was they actually upgraded, kind of like the Meyer thing, they updated the electronics. As far as I know, the box itself is the same. Like same wood, same grill, same speaker. They just updated the technology inside of the box, which allows you to add more together and link them and splay that, their QC's fake splay thing.
It's
and
probably
all that
different
kind of
now. I think when I looked originally, the plastic box had the technology, but the the wood stuff didn't.
Well, originally the wood box was designed to hang. It had mounting options, so you could add mounts to hang it horizontally or vertically. And the plastic one didn't. You weren't supposed to hang the plastic one. It was supposed to go on sticks or on the ground.
Okay.
That was the big difference. But the wood does sound better than the plastic. You can hear that difference. The wood sounds a little bit more natural. The plastic sounds a little bit more like hollow and boxy sounding.
Yeah.
So they do sound slightly different. So I would always suggest the wood one anyways, just because of the sound quality, and it costs a fraction more.
Definitely.
But again, those two speakers, it's the K12 and the KW12. The W, I think, stands for wood. So those are the two different speakers. But now they have the .2, so it's like the K12.2 or something like that, or 2.0.
Yeah,
so it's the second
like
gen. But all they did was change the thing. So I think they added like dumb things like Bluetooth. You can now Bluetooth into your speaker, kind of thing. Like it's like little like electronic upgrades to the same box. And
you didn't know, Bluetooth is very, very compressed. It's a low quality audio.
It is.
Yeah.
So with an X32, we're talking about audio consoles. Like we've had some X32s last years, and we've had some X32s just not last at all.
The early X32s had a bad rap. The newest ones have been quite refined.
I mean, and we've had some X32 racks that we've left in racks powered on 24/7 for like 3 years before the power supplies went out. But then we just swapped the power supplies and they were good as new. So
yep, took 2 months to get that power supply, but it does work.
But it does work, yeah. And then you take like let's high-end Digico SD8. There's like 15-year-old SD8s that still work. And technically the SD8 is now discontinued, but they replaced it with the SD10, which is almost the exact same console. They upgraded like the hardware a little bit, but it's basically, you can run an SD8 show on it, so it's basically an SD8. And it's still going. So it's again, they like slightly updated it after 15 years. And
I wonder if sometimes it's just manufacturing like outdated gear. Like you have to upgrade eventually
because of parts and what's available and that kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, but the other thing is like the SD8 is still a perfectly usable console.
Yep.
Being 15, it's going actually beyond 15 years old now.
That's amazing. Like just to think about that, that's amazing.
So, for example, one of Bethel's consoles, SD8s, is 15 years old. And we've swapped the power supplies and done some stuff to like obviously help it out a little bit. So they have a 15-year-old SD8, 15, it's 15 years, like the technology is 15 years old, but it's, it's like a 7-year-old PA, but the technology is like 15 plus years old and is creating some of the best sound in the Christian industry out there with older technology. So what I'm trying to say is it still is good technology, even though it's old technology. So you can do a lot. And the lifespan and longevity of the audio world tends to last a lot longer.
Definitely.
And you don't need the upgrade.
Right.
As much as we want the upgrade, do we need the upgrade? And that's where it's like, yes, we always want to keep advancing and making ourselves better. But
what about the Vineyard Church in LA?
Anaheim Vineyard?
Anaheim Vineyard. That PA is what box again?
Leopard. That's a new box.
That's a new box. So that, to me, walking into that environment, I could hear the technology difference for sure. There was definitely a noticeable change, and I was.
But we did replace a really, really, really old.
I never heard
system.
the old one. I'm just saying
it was
Meyer.
I don't even remember what it was. Oh, it was old Meyer. It was old Meyer.
Oh, okay.
Really old Meyer. I can't remember I know it was Meyer though. Old point source system.
Well, I came into it just fresh, walking in, and I mean, of course, the music was great, but I was more blown away at the coverage of the spoken word part.
Right. Yeah.
It just sounded so.
The spoken word in that room does sound
felt
really good.
It felt like he was standing 3 feet in front of me, and we were having a conversation.
Yeah.
That to me was trippy. I was like, wow, that's like 3D sound right there.
And we put an SD10 in that room as well. They upgraded from a Yamaha.
So you can definitely say that technology does matter, but it's not required. It's definitely marginal.
Exactly. And it is nice. Like when you have that new technology, there's things that you can do that make it that much better, which is awesome. But I'm just trying to get at like, it definitely seems like audio is like in that world of like the absolute need
you get
to
10
change.
years plus.
Yeah, exactly. Even Pro Tools has been around, like there's modern Pro Tools, but Pro Tools has been around forever, and there's people still using old versions of Pro Tools to do stuff that's awesome. Now, the bummer with like Pro Tools, and we're getting into software, and that's where software changes a lot. So things like
technology changes a lot there.
Software, your plugins, like you can't use the most up-to-date plugins if you're using an old version of Pro Tools, things like that. So software tends to change a lot faster than hardware does. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's where it really is a bummer in the audio space because they're subject to the hardware components being composed or being manufactured at the time. Like, processor technology changes, they have to adapt. There is no choice there.
Right. And I think
once you buy a new computer, you're like, if it's different, they have to adjust for that.
Right. And I think now that we're talking about this is like, I guess a good point to take away is actually you're paying, like, okay, if you're wanting to buy a Digico or looking at buying a new console and you're like, oh man, a Digico, like an SD8 or, is like used at like 20, 30K, SD10 is like 150K. You're like, ouch. But let's talk about the SD8, for example, again, is even though it was old hardware, they still allowed you to add Stealth Core 2. So upgraded the hardware, take ways off of it, sped up the console a ton, all those things. So we paid a lot of money for hardware that is still supported and gets all the updates. So
you're getting quality and longevity.
Yeah, same thing with like the Lion. Like you paid a lot of money for that speaker, and then they released a card, and so you paid a little bit of money and were able to keep the technology going. So it's just that kind of thing. Like it's like, do your investment once or do it 3 or 4 times in the same amount of time.
Like what it always comes down to, honestly. But let's save the synopsis for later, I guess. But good talking points for sure on audio.
Yeah. I mean,
like, what did we accomplish in that conversation? I don't really know, but quality does matter, and you get what you pay for sure.
Absolutely.
But overall, I think the trend in the industry, audio is slower. And if you invest in good hardware, you don't have to depend on software.
Right.
And you'll have consistent hardware and consistent quality, consistent workflows, which means consistent training of staff, like all those types of things. It's a more professional way to go for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you rely on your technology, in this case, software or computer hardware, that's where it kind of gets really expensive, because the things that people don't think of is the maintenance of that, the updates, the testing, the troubleshooting. You know what I mean? Like that, it gets so much more expensive. So I think I would.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think I would probably just say that like quality hardware is probably where.
And
where I would land.
I think my last point is, when we can move on from audio, is like even the console, like an SD8. I keep using it as an example. It's a control surface. It's a hardware. Like you have to have the rack. You can get an SD rack with the 32-bit pre's and still use it with your SD8. So now again, you're making a smaller investment on a rack, using the same MADI or fiber that you already have ran, and the same mixing surface that you already are using, the SD8. And now you just upgraded your sound quality tremendously by going from, if you had an old MADI rack to the SD rack with the 32-bit pre's. Now your sound quality is through the roof. You can do 196 and all those things on it. And you didn't spend $150K on a console. You spent $20K on a rack. So again, it's like one of those things where it's like you buy into the hardware system and then you get those updates and you're actually not spending as much money down the road. It's just things to think about.
Yeah, it's like when you buy an X32, it's not modular. It just, you use it. It's great.
When it dies, throw it away.
You throw it away,
buy
you buy a
another
new
one.
So,
And again, they came out with the wing. Not like it's like a whole different thing. It's like it wasn't an upgrade to the X32. It was just a new product.
yeah, I mean, it's overall an upgrade, but
It's an upgrade in itself, but it doesn't upgrade your X32.
right. You have to buy a new product.
You have to buy a new product.
Yeah.
So, which in some people's cases, you buy an X32, and if it's like I buy an X32 every 3 years, and I've spent $10,000 in the last 10 years, I'm still cheaper than a Digico. Yeah, sure. But you don't have better sound.
It's true. That is true.
You still have an X32.
It's true.
Okay, so I think the next.
We should go lighting because
Yeah, I was gonna say lighting.
still can't have good production without lighting.
And I think we talked about this earlier. Lighting in the last 5 years, I feel like, has taken a large leap because almost all manufacturers were moving away from lamps and into the LED game to be more energy efficient. They have all the cost savings, less maintenance, all that kind of stuff. To where now, 2021, I feel like most manufacturers are all LED. Very few manufacturers have lamp fixtures still. And LED technology has
pretty
advanced
rare.
so far that I feel like now we're going to see a little bit less lighting fixtures come into the market as fast because they're not trying to catch up with the LED game.
I agree. I think the technology for LED driven light sources or light engines, that technology has been well refined, not just in brightness, but in thermal management and then CRI ratings and
in like color profiles and things like that.
Color consistency and then longevity. So like heat just always destroys things and LEDs still have a lot of heat.
Yeah.
They're just a third of the heat.
Right.
So that still has to be managed. And how do we keep it cooled?
And it still requires maintenance. There's fans and dust and all those things that you still have to like maintain. But
the point being is that because of that refinement, all those fixtures have been replaced, and the only people using lamps now are big fixtures that need excessive amounts of light.
Right, like the BMFL, the Mac 3, things like that are massive fixtures and still brighter than any LED out there. They require that lamp.
And they're specialized lamps.
But people are buying those fixtures or using those fixtures specifically for that fixture.
Usually really big venues and stuff. So that market is shrinking. So
right. And now you look at like the VL3K, that's like one of the most popular lamped fixtures out there, movers, and you can buy them for like $200 used now.
Yeah.
Which is insane. And, Martin just replaced the Viper and like the Quantums with their Era fixtures. And, Robe has like the S-Bright and the Viva now, which is replacing the older lamped fixtures. And it's everyone's moving into that LED space. ETC has, they've replaced all their lamped Lecos. You can now even buy LED retrofits for your lamped Lecos and Pars. And ETC is famous for those fixtures, and they're moving into the LED space completely as well,
Yep.
And you can buy a Leco for like at $50, like an actual ETC 750 watt Leco for like $50. That's insane.
Yeah. What's amazing, here in America, like I'll go to all these different places, and there's not a whole. I mean, LED's starting to catch up. But it's amazing. Like the LED Lecos, I was in Jamaica, right? Let me just drop that real quick. I was doing a job in Jamaica, and it was impressive. The light that came out of one fixture, what I normally would have to have 3 fixtures, I was squeaking away with about 1.
Yeah.
It was insane.
And I think part of it is like you don't even have like, if you're talking about a lamp and you have after, they get dimmer as you use them more. And so you end up having to have more. Anyways, it's just kind of like, it's kind of how it goes. You end up having more because they get dimmer over time and you don't want to be replacing lamps all the time. But the LED is going to be consistent all the way through because it's not going to. It doesn't have that lamp technology, so it's just, you know, you have the 20,000 hours, 50,000 hours, whatever, you know, product you're buying, and that brightness is going to stay consistent all the way to the end. You know, plus, you know, you get the high CRI fixtures; they're just going to look better altogether.
The day that we got our first LED/laser projector changed my life.
Laser projectors are amazing.
Just want to throw that in there because it doesn't totally fit, but it totally applies to lighting because it is the same technology essentially.
Man, remember how many times we had to replace lamps in those Barcos and maintain those projectors? It was so dumb. This is really annoying.
Over it. It was awful. I think I had a cleaning schedule once a month, and if I missed it, I would blow a lamp because we used them so much. We had so much dust and just airflow.
It's changed the game for sure.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, I used to have to set up scaffolding to do that.
Oh, sucks.
So think about that.
Scissor lifts. Scissor lifts are really nice.
Oh man.
Well, let's. Oh, I mean, okay. So the last part of lighting is like consoles, and I still feel like, it kind of ties into the audio side of things, like the Grand MA1, Grand MA2, you know, industry standard consoles. They have the MA3 consoles now, but they're like decades old.
And honestly, when it comes to lighting, I feel like it's marginally shorter duration than audio. Audio, I feel like lasts much longer.
And I think like now
that lighting has changed,
and in LED, it's gonna last just as long as audio is.
I think the exception there is moving parts, right? You have these.
Yeah, there's more maintenance, I would say, on a light, especially if it's a mover.
Yeah, especially with movers. So that's probably going to be the exception. Mm-hmm. But again, just like before, quality is going to have a big part of that.
Yeah, I mean, you buy your American DJ fixture, and it's probably going to die a lot faster than if you buy your.
It's not probably. It's when.
It will die at some point, and it's like you buy your Martin or your Robe or something, a better branded, even the Chevrolet Pro line instead of the Chevrolet DJ line, and they're just going to last
so much
longer.
Yeah.
And they're gonna look better.
Yeah, and I think what drives me nuts, the cheaper fixtures skimp out on the frequency, like the seeing the stutter,
the refresh rate.
Yeah, like the refresh rate, but seeing that like on camera and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Even I remember when Elevation first had their fixtures out, saying, "Oh yeah, it's flicker free." And
Elation. You said Elevation.
Oh,
when Elation.
When Elation first started putting out their fixture LED fixtures, they were flicker free, but they weren't really.
Yeah, it depended on what your actual settings were.
Yeah,
and I probably answer that question the most. My LED lights are flickering, and it's like you can do a little bit in camera to help get around that, but in the end, if you have cheap LEDs.
You can't.
You will never get away from the flicker.
Not 100%.
It's just how it is. So buy quality, and you won't deal with flicker. And then if you get really expensive, like Robe or GLP, and you can change the frequency, so you can set the camera to what you absolutely want and need it to be, and then you change your lights to not flicker with your camera settings. That's professional.
If you had the money, I mean, I would so go for that.
100%.
As a video guy, like to have that.
Yeah, I don't want to have to change my settings around the lights. I need the lights to work with what my settings are for my specific shoot.
99% of the time, I have to adjust cameras to accommodate lighting.
Exactly, and we want to be doing it the other way.
I hate that.
Yeah. Well, I guess we kind of already started talking about video, so
it's natural, and it's funny because audio, video, or audio lighting. And now video is really like the priority. So it is the flow. Like you need audio, you need lighting, so you can have great video.
And I feel like, we'll quickly talk about this. I feel like people skip the lighting portion. They go straight from audio to video. And then they're like, why does my video look so bad? And it's because you skipped your lighting. Like you have to have good lighting to have good video. Just
Yeah.
like you have to have good audio to have good video, you have to have those two to do anything with video.
Absolutely. And so we very purposely did that because it does matter.
It very much matters.
So video, you get what you pay for there too.
Well, yes, you do get what you pay for, but I feel like the video world is the fastest evolving new technology every single year.
And I think it's because, in my opinion, it's because that's where the consumer interacts with it the most.
Yeah, I can see that.
Their devices and their technology is driving that space because it's the consumer, it's the market. How are they consuming their content or their media?
Right.
And so those devices are really shaping what video looks like for us. So that demand is highly, highly competitive and a huge driver to the technology.
Yeah.
And while audio and video just isn't as sexy, audio and lighting is not as sexy as something like video because video is just so much easier to see. Ironically,
if you don't have lights, you can't see.
Yeah, you can't see. But
the video world is changing so fast. You know, Blackmagic, what they came out with like 3 or 4 cameras this year. You know, just as an example, you know, Red came out with the Komodo this year, but they've been changing their cameras, you know, constantly with new sensors and things like that.
Yep.
Panasonic is changing. Canon came out with 3 or 4 cameras this year.
I would probably feature like maybe a couple different approaches to how I would look at the technology, and there's sensor quality and then there's resolution.
And every company wants to be pushing resolution right now. It's kind of nuts. Like, you got Blackmagic who did a big flex, and they're like, Ursa Mini 12K. It's like, whoa.
That was a big flex.
It was kind of like, you only did that as a flex. It's almost like, who cares about 12K right now? But
just so you know, I watched the whole presentation, very long presentation. I watched all the little sensors being brought out and why they did it. From a engineering perspective, it makes sense. It didn't feel like as much of a flex as much as a strategic engineering decision. I really appreciated their approach there.
I just feel like they were like, let's one up Red, because Red's always pushed resolution. Like, they had the Red one was 4K before anything else was 4K.
Hey, they're definitely positioned in a unique position, in a unique space where they're developing resolution and color science at the same time. Most of the time when people are developing, it seems like they have this push for resolution, but the quality of the color never changes.
Exactly.
So I have high hopes for Blackmagic in the future. And I think technically that whole camera and that whole workflow is still kind of this beta process. But there's
not very many of them out there.
There's not. And I'm really excited about it. I'm not going to lie. I think it's still really cool.
But I mean, like 6K this year is like the year of 6K. It feels like everything now does 6K.
Yeah, and it does.
And it's almost like, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but how we were moving into the 4K world, and it's like, now we have to have 4K. But now that we have all these 4K deliverables, everyone's like, I have to have 6K.
I mean, if I was being honest, I really want to be at the 8K mark just for post edit reasons. And I was really excited about the 12K because it really makes post editing a reality.
Right.
Where you're getting 2 shots, you know, doing a post crop for your second camera shot. In that scenario, it's really exciting. But so far, the sensor quality in all of them is just not quite good enough.
Right. I mean, like
especially side by side. Like when you put the crop next to the full scale image, it doesn't look.
I think like Red with their 8K, the Helium, and the Monstro is really crushing it with that. Like,
which ultimately is what I'm getting to. It's like
Marquez on MKBHD, like his channel, he uses that 8K crop all the time, and it looks, you can't tell honestly when he crops in to 4K on an 8K sensor. That's impressive. But again, Red has the longest development of their sensor out of anyone. Like, they really develop their sensors and their image quality with the resolution. But they do a lot of R&D on those sensors, and they've had they've been doing it a lot longer than Blackmagic has.
It's very true. And, I mean, that was their focus, was to be a cinema camera company. I mean, a bunch of engineers got together and built that. So,
Right. Blackmagic obviously starting with switchers and hardware and then adding cameras. Like, cameras were not first with Blackmagic at all. It was routers, converters, and switchers.
yeah, it was really interesting how like Blackmagic got into that market, and then so did AJA and all these just random little tech companies all of a sudden had a camera.
Yep.
It's like almost overnight. You're like, oh, wow, everybody has a camera now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And most of them died out. I think Blackmagic is the one of those lower market cameras that actually has stayed with it and has done a really good job. I mean, this right now is actually a Pocket 6K. We rarely use it in 6K, but it does have the better sensor performance as far as highlights and whatnot. But color, while it's good, is not the same as a red.
Nope.
At all.
We noticed that even setting up this shot. Like, we're like, oh, yep, not a red. Got way used to using red. This is not it. But, you have the Pocket 6K does 6K, the Komodo 6K does 6K, the Zcam F6 does 6K. There's a lot of like the FS6 from Sony came out. I think that at least does 5K, but I think it does 6K.
I'm not enough of a nerd to know like specific sensor technologies like on the back of my hand, but thermal is a big part of it. Processing power, battery life, hard drive speed. So how fast can we record it? There's also things like licensing and different codecs, what they're approved to use, what they're willing to pay for, what their target audience is willing to pay for and use. All those things factor the development of a camera. It's crazy.
Well, and I feel like having raw video even in 2020 has been like a whole nother thing on top of resolution and like sensor. It's raw. Like raw video you had to pay a lot of money to have raw video.
Yeah, you did.
And now, the Pocket
Now it's
6K, the Pocket 4K,
standard.
it's like
becoming standard. And I honestly, when we were planning this, I actually wanted to do video last because of RAW. That was literally in my mind, because you need good audio, you need good lighting, and you need a good sensor and good resolution. So for your post edit, but RAW means creativity, right? Post edit, And so like all of I keep hitting this thing. All of these things are foundational, and it's the more you can afford each step, it is only going to empower you that much more in the creative process.
Yeah,
because you can't do any of this. It's like, hey, you finally got your red camera, but you got an X32 and a American DJ lighting. You're not going to get the benefit of that red. You might see a boost in quality, but you'll never hit it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so it's just like all these things have to be addressed. They kind of grow together. They mature with not only your staff, but their ability. But why do we do it? Why do we upgrade all these things? Why are we even talking about this? It's knowing when is it appropriate to upgrade your system?
Yeah, and I think on top of that, I've seen a ton this year. Like, I probably see this post more than any other post in forums, things like that. We have $1,000 for a camera. What's the best camera to buy? We have $1,500 to live stream. What's the best camera to get? And it's like, my first question is, where did they get that number from? Like, what caused them to say we have $1,000? And it might be that they only have $1,000 to spend, or $1,500 to spend. But it's kind of like, where did your budget number come from?
I know.
Maybe we should evaluate the rest of your gear, the rest of what you're doing, to actually come up with that number and what you should buy.
Which is very much an integrator approach, but ultimately it's a console, because most people make emotional buying decisions. And that's because they don't actually have a vision or a purpose for their technology.
Absolutely.
They don't know where they're going. They just know that bigger tools means, I mean, if I could offend people, I'd say bigger egos. Bigger egos, you can stroke someone's ego that much more. And it's like, cool, what did that get you if you don't understand what you're doing with it?
Right.
And that's not even just competency. It's having an understanding of how to leverage your tool. Something I'm super passionate about, as you know.
No, yeah, I fully agree. I think, I don't think that. Sorry, start over. It's so weird to see people just come out with that number, and I feel like it is out of the emotional, like, oh, we have to do this. This is the most I'll spend on it.
This is how much I understand, so this is how much I feel like I want to put towards that, with no consideration.
And a lot of those people that are like, we have $1,000 to spend on a camera. What's the best setup? And the answer is most likely this. You know what I mean? It's like, what's your system? Oh, if you look at their system, it's like, oh, maybe you should just use your phone, and then you don't need your ATEM and your converters and your camera and your lenses and all those things. You could just do it all in one.
Yeah, people definitely fixate on the wrong things, and it's easy. We're all guilty of that. I think we've even talked about similar things before on different shows and things we've recorded, but understanding your why really drives your buying decision.
Yeah.
And when to upgrade is probably could be summed up with, where am I being limited creatively? Like, what is my roadblock?
Yeah.
So buy smart. Definitely buy smart. And buy as much as you can afford. But the thing is, how much you can afford needs to be driven by the vision that you have. Yeah. Because what you can afford should not be a feeling. It should be, this is the tool I can afford. But so you might have a $5,000 budget, but as long as you have a $20,000 vision, then you're going to chip away at that 20. That's my point.
Yeah,
it's like, as long as you have that big picture, you're going to make so much better informed decisions.
Yeah, I agree.
There it is. Let me just sum it up for you. So, I mean, I hope that was helpful.
I know we kind of just ranted about gear, and
we definitely ranted,
and prices and things like that. But it was just something that popped into my head, and I thought, let's talk about it.
Let's just talk about it.
And
it's a pretty informal podcast. Even our format doesn't even stay consistent. So, really, it's just for us to kind of
have a conversation,
talk about what's important to us in the moment.
Absolutely.
Honestly. But I do think the narrative is around Pro Status is, the deeper conversation. How are we using technology? And so this is a really great episode to demonstrate why we have this podcast, which is talking about how do we make these decisions, protecting creativity, bringing the full picture into something is part of that pro status or pro mindset.
Yeah. And honestly, like, we would love to help you if you're in that position of, I have $1,000 to spend, or my pastor's only letting us spend $1,000, whatever it is. We'd love to help you guys in that. So message us on social media, and we'd love to talk with you guys about what you should and shouldn't invest your money on. We want to make sure that you have the right tools for the job, and you're not going overboard, or and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. If there's anything we can do, that's give you some vision for your technology. Sure. So,
well, throughout this up down below, check out our merch on Production Warehouse. You can get any of Pro Status merch, like this hat here. And hope you guys have a good day, and catch you in the next one.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Status Podcast. Be sure to go to the website and download all the episode details.